Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 88 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Sherrie Dunlevy for this episode. Sherrie is the author of a book called How Can I Help? Your go-to guide for helping loved ones through life's difficulties. And it's all about this question of how we can best be supportive of our friends, our family, our neighbors, our colleagues, the people around us when they are grieving. And she actually reached out and interviewed lots and lots of people who had many different types of losses and asked them all kinds of questions about what had been most helpful to them, what people had done that was or was not helpful, or said that was, more or less helpful. So lots of practical ideas, lots of thoughts on what to say if you really don't know what to say, thoughts on attending funerals and writing condolence cards. So this is one of those episodes that is for all those friends and family and colleagues and neighbors out there who may be looking to support the people in their life who are grieving. So if you're listening, I would encourage you to share it with your friends, particularly if they're wondering how they can help, and do check out Sherrie's book. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Sherrie Dunlevy. The Widowed Parent Podcast is supported by Audible, and I'm excited to say that listeners can get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial. Just go to audibletrial.com/widowedparent. That's audibletrial.com/widowedparent, and you get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial of Audible. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Sherrie Dunlevy. Sherrie is an author, speaker, and grief educator. She is the host of the Graduating Grief podcast and the author of How Can I Help? Your go-to guide for helping loved ones through life's difficulties. Sherrie is joining us today from Wheeling, West Virginia. Sherrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jenny, for having me here.
Yeah, well, I've really been looking forward to speaking with you, and this is going to be it'll be a different sort of an episode because this is a discussion, especially for those people that I like to call allies, those family and friends who want to be helpful, the colleagues, the neighbors of widowed parents, and they may be asking themselves, how can I help? Or what do I do? What don't I do? I know a lot of people have asked me that question. So I was very glad to read your book, which is full of advice exactly for allies. So let's just jump right in here. Why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote this book because it was a book that I felt needed to be written. My husband and I lost our son, Brandon, 21 years ago. And during that time, we also lost 3 of our closest friends. And when you're going through a loss, it's excruciating as it is. And then to have people that you think were going to be there show up in some manner, and they just don't. In fact, I always tell this story of I was expecting my friend when she called me to tell me, I found the sitter for the kids. I'm coming up. I'm going to be there. And what I heard instead was, I can't handle this. And I didn't hear from her for 6 more years.
Wow.
Well, by that time, it's not that I was holding any ill feeling, but it was just too late. That relationship was fractured. But that phone call 6 years later made me really start thinking, well, what was that about? Why is it that people don't show up? Now, the simple answer is fear. I think 3 main reasons, though, is because, first of all, it hits too close to home. It's almost as if it's contagious, or you immediately put yourself in someone else's shoes that it's happening to, and it's so frightening that they can't even imagine it, so they just can't go there at all, and so they don't. The second thing is they desperately want to say or do something, but they're so afraid they're going to say or do the wrong thing that's going to make it worse for us or going to make us cry. Well, newsflash, we're already crying. And the third thing is that they literally do not know what to do or what to say. They've not reached a point in life where either that was modeled for them or they experienced something like that. So I kept thinking, wow, if there was just some kind of resource out there for people that could just make it simpler, make it a no-brainer. It's like, oh, that I could do that. And so that they could show up in some way that the relationships would be okay. They'd be salvaged. They'd be strengthened. And the person grieving could feel supported. And the ally, as you say, could feel like they were there for them. And every time I would look for this resource, I couldn't find it. I would, Google, Amazon, walk into bookstores. Remember when we could do that? Walk into bookstores, and I kept leaving empty-handed. And this voice inside of me said, keep looking, but you're not going to find it until you write it. So what I didn't tell you was my background is a television news anchor and reporter. And so one thing, I thought, I write news copy. I don't write books. But then I thought, I do interview people. And so that's what I decided to do, was interview people from all walks of life, from all different types of loss, and ask them, what did your friends and family do? What did you find most helpful? What was it that was really unique that someone did? And now you do it to help other people. And then I say, what was not so helpful? I don't say wrong. And the reason that I don't say wrong is because it's just from my thought and my thought only. But I feel that it's better to show up awkwardly than not show up at all. It's better to say something that may be more awkward than to not say anything at all. That's just my opinion. But I think that when I talk to a lot of grievers, they share that opinion as well.
Well, and I think it's terrific that you talk to so many people. And I think some themes emerged in these discussions. And I think right off the bat, you say one thing every single person you talked to said being there was the most important thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, being there, just be there, be present with them, be present in their grief and in their sorrow. And, it can mean physically, show up for the funeral, show up to their house, make phone calls to them. But it's just letting them know that you're there, you're present, and you're ready to help them in any way that's possible. And what I found out about this is it doesn't have to be just a physical. You don't have to be physically there to be there. You can show up in so many other ways. One of the ways that I showed up for a friend who had brain cancer was that I would send Facebook in Messenger, I would send little audio messages to them because they weren't able to really see their phone. They weren't able to carry on conversations. They couldn't talk to me, but I could talk to them. And so, you can be there in many ways. You can be there by sending them cards. You can be there by reaching out and leaving them voicemails, even though they don't call you back. Virtually, you can set up a Zoom with them. You can do this one really amazing thing. You can pick up a phone and have a conversation with them if you want, So there are many ways. You don't have to pull up to their house into their driveway and sit on the couch with them. That's nice if you can and if that's what they prefer. But there are many ways that you can be there. Just people want to know that you're there and you recognize what they're going through.
So it sounds like you're saying find some ways to be present in their life, whether you're nearby or not nearby, whether it's in person or virtually. Find those ways to be present in whatever ways work and make sense.
Absolutely. One of the things, I love virtually. Virtually is a blessing, but the one thing I have to tell you that it rubs me like sandpaper. When someone announces someone's death on social media, someone's passing, and then everyone does the hugs and prayers and thinks that's enough. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And I hope that when you're writing hugs and prayers, you are actually saying a prayer. Because that was the second most important thing that people said that was very meaningful to them, and knowing that the people were praying for them really was a healing agent for them.
Okay, so you mentioned hugs and prayers, or some kind of short Facebook response or social media response is the tip of the iceberg. I guess so. Once someone does that, quick thing, what else should they be thinking about doing?
I literally would send. I would send a message on Messenger. If I knew them well, I would pick up the phone and leave them at least a voicemail. And I always say when I call them, listen, I just am calling. I want you to hear my voice, and I want you to know that I love you and I'm supporting you and I'm praying for you and I am here and I'm going to keep on checking on you. And you do not have to pick up the phone and call me back. And you never have to pick up the phone and talk to me if you don't want to. But I want you to know that I'm going to keep on checking on you. And someday, if you feel like picking up the phone, I will, I'm here for you.
That is such an important point, that kind of letting them off the hook of, you don't have to call me back and I'm still here.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've heard from people that said, well, I called them twice and they never called me back. They must not want. I'm thinking, they don't even know what day it is. No, they don't even know what time of day it is. They don't, it's not about, I guess, you know what, Jenny, it's not about you at that point. It's not about you. It's about them.
Right.
It's about supporting them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's almost like, it sounds like the, the normal rules of social interaction in a non-grieving situation. You wouldn't call someone a million times and they never called you back, and then maybe you're stalking them or something. But if they're in this kind of grief situation, I hear you saying that it's, you can keep calling, you should keep calling, and you don't necessarily have to expect to hear back. And it still is helping your friend. Right.
I mean, you don't have to call them 5 times a day, but every other day to check in. Hey, I'm just checking in.
Yeah.
I'm headed to the store. Do you need me to drop by anything?
Right.
Do you need me to sit and plop down on the couch with you? I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me, I had a friend who dropped a card in the mail probably once a week during the whole 8 months my husband was sick. And, the interesting thing was, and I wanted to ask you about this was not somebody who had previously been a close friend, right? It was previously had been more someone in my social circle who I knew through school, not my school, the kids' school. Right. So can you talk a little bit about that? I think you talk about, sometimes the people who step up and don't step up might surprise you.
Absolutely. It was very surprising to me. When I was in television, we would pass this, on my way to the station, I would pass this house that had the parents of a gentleman I worked with always sat out on their front porch. It was just really a wave to Keith's parents. If they were out on the porch, everyone that at my station would wave to them. And from the time that during my pregnancy, I had complications. So I had to leave the station a little bit early, was on bed rest. From the time that I was on bed rest to the time I came back from my maternity leave and then grieving leave, these people sent me a card every single week. We're praying. First, we're praying for you and the safe delivery of your son. Then we're praying for your son. And then it was, after my son passed, we're praying for you and your family. We miss seeing you, and it was just things like that. And I thought, these are people I just waved to, on the way to work. And what a difference that made. And I had a teacher at a local Christian school that she sent me and my husband a manila envelope. And one day, all of her students, drew us cards. A couple of teachers that had their students draw us cards. And just things like that were people I didn't know, but people that knew our deep pain and wanted to somehow brighten our day, wanted us to somehow know that there were people out there that were thinking of us and that were bearing witness to that pain.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of cards, I know that, sending actual mail in the actual, paper in the postal service is not so common anymore. But can you talk about, are condolence cards sent in the mail still important, and what tips do you have about that?
Absolutely. It's my number one. It's my number one go-to personally. for a number of reasons. My son died 21 years ago, and I still have some of those cards today.
Oh.
One of those cards literally changed my life and changed it so profoundly that it's why I'm doing what I do today, why I'm not doing broadcasting anymore. And it's something tangible, an email. It's in cyberspace, but this is something tangible that when you're having a bad day, you can go to it. And one of the things that I like to tell people is share a memory of that person, or share a story, or share something other than love, Mr. and Mrs. Dunlevy, because, people have to have things to cling on to, and especially me, because I didn't have a lot of memories of my son. So those cards are really evidence of his life and his death and the love that was sent to us. And isn't it nice to go out to the mailbox and get something other than junk mail, bills, and political, material? I mean, it's just, I just think it's wonderful, and it's a lost art. I always practically write a letter inside of a card.
Okay. So, and I'm imagining though that somebody listening might think that sounds like a great idea, but I just can't, I don't know what the right words are to make this better for them. And I just can't imagine writing something. What would you suggest?
I would suggest that you just share your heart. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be something that's profound. I always tell people, there are no magic words that exist on the face of the earth that's going to make this all better. So take that pressure off of you. Just release that, let it go. And then let your heart flow onto it. My heart hurts that your hearts are breaking right now. I can't imagine losing a son, but please know that you have people out here that are praying for you, or that are thinking of you. Or, if it's your dad made such a difference in my life. He was my little league coach, and I'll never forget how he, whatever. Share something that share something that lets them know that person mattered to other people too, and let them see a different side of them that they might not know about. That's a gift. You're giving them a gift by doing that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And especially what you said about there are no magic words. So take that pressure off yourself.
Right.
And just go ahead and do something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because I do think that's something that a task that people dread and, may put off or not get around to, or wonder if it's all that important. So thank you for
Wouldn't you even rather have someone be honest and say, I have tried to write this card 3 times, and every time I write it, I break down crying because I'm so sad for you.
Yeah. Well, okay. And can you talk about that, because I think this then gets over to the topic of, well, what about when you see somebody in person and you don't know what to say or whatever? And that was going to be my next question is, if you don't know what to say to them, what do you say?
I have no idea what to say. To be honest, here's why, Jenny, people don't know what to say and do. It's because we don't practice it enough, right? Death is something that is going to affect every single human being alive on this planet today. And yet when it happens, everyone is totally shocked that it happened. And we don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. So I feel the more you talk about it, the more comfortable it becomes. And even to say, I don't know what to say, I'm so sad. I'm so sad for you. I can't even imagine. And a note to the griever too, realize that this is awkward, and extend grace to people who might say things awkward. Don't assume that they're saying things to be mean-hearted to you, unless you truly know they're being mean-hearted. But most people have loving intentions. And so if they say something awkwardly, you have a choice whether to let those words cut you or whether to let those words heal you. And I would hope that you would extend that grace to even the most awkward of person that's at least is trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think at some point you mentioned funerals, and I wanted to ask you about that because you said something in your book, which I thought was a really important point, to not base your decision on whether or not to attend the funeral on how well you knew the deceased person. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, a lot of times we go, well, that was Martha's mother, and I didn't know Martha's mother at all. Why, that's really silly for me to go. Well, you're not going for Martha's mother. You're going because Martha's your friend, or Martha's your coworker, or Martha's the woman that sits next to you in church, or Martha's your favorite checkout clerk at the dry cleaner that you see every Monday, or your dog groomer. That's why you go. You go to support the living. You can pay your respects to the dead, but you're there to support the living. And a lot of people will tell me, and I am included in this, sometimes you don't remember who all came, but boy, for some reason you can remember who wasn't there.
Interesting. Oh, excuse me. I said before we started, I hoped I didn't cough during this, and here I go. All right. Okay, and then on the topic of funerals, how about the tendency of some people to disappear after the funeral?
Right. It is so important to check in on your friends after the funeral. Everyone, it seems, pre-COVID, would gather at the home, at the funeral home, at the funeral luncheon, then family would take care of, the final arrangements. And then, everybody goes back to their home, their hometown, their life. And then all of a sudden, the real reality of that grief kicks in when you're home all alone, and the invitations stop coming, and the casseroles stop coming, and the phone calls stop coming, and it can really send you into a tizzy. I think it's very important that we check in on people and be there, especially, through that first year. That first year is so important because there's so many things that they're going to have to experience now for the first time without that loved one. It could be, I know my son died at the end of April, and less than 2 weeks later was Mother's Day. And then a month later was Father's Day. And it was just like, and you don't know what to expect. You're assuming that you're going to be a wreck, but you don't know, and I found that many times on those days, you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing. It's different, but then you have the first Thanksgiving, the first Christmas, the birthday, anniversary, whatever. And so I was lucky enough to have friends that, remembered and would send me plants or send me cards on those anniversary dates, just to let me know that they're thinking of us, that they remember Brandon and they remember us, and know that this is going to be probably a tough time for us, but they're sending their love.
Mm-hmm. And what if somebody is worried about, if I contact them some weeks down the road or some months down the road, maybe I'll upset them all over again?
When I just feel, would you rather them cry alone? They're crying already. So wouldn't it be nice? I always say, I'm here to lend you an ear or a shoulder or both, whatever you need, and that's what I feel. People are grieving. They're going to feel sad. They're going to cry. And what a gift you're giving them to say, you know what? I'm going to sit in this with you, and whatever you need to do, you just go ahead and do it. I'll be fine. I'm here to support you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Terrific. let's turn to the practical for a minute, because I think you have some sections of your book where you lay out, maybe some things maybe you haven't thought of. Here are some practical ways, whether it's, right while someone is ill or right around the time of a death or maybe after that. Can you share a few suggestions with us?
Of just things that they can do?
Yeah, to be helpful.
I just think, just think about things that you have, going on around your house and especially if you have gender specific roles, like, I don't know, I don't cut the grass, and if I would lose my husband, I probably wouldn't even think about cutting the grass until it was probably about a foot, 2 feet off the, growth. And then it would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. Or someone doesn't, maybe a man doesn't wash clothes or doesn't cook, so just things like that. So you can start thinking about things, errands. Can I run some errands? I'm running to the grocery. Can I bring you anything? Do you need any laundry detergent? Do you need any laundry done? Can I run the kids somewhere? Can I take your dog during the funeral? Can I sit with the kids or with the dogs? Or can I be at the house to receive food or whatever might come? Do you need someone to spend the night with you? I mean, for a lot of people that feel all alone, maybe have never, ever been alone, lived alone before. Do you need someone to spend the night with you? Can I bring you over a funny movie? Do you get gift cards so you don't have to cook? I say one of the things that I say in the not so helpful section, which everybody says, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Well, they're never going to let you know. They're never going to let you know. It's putting that back on them. So a better way to say that is, hey, can I come over and, clean your house? Can I come over and, wash the car? Do you need gas? Do you need me to do some laundry for you? Can I bring breakfast tomorrow? Things that you're willing to do, and maybe give them some suggestions. And they might say, I don't need that now, but next week I might need that. Yes. Thank you. So always things that you're willing to do. And I know I said clean the house. That's one of the things I'll never say to someone is, can I come over and clean your house? But I would say, could I send someone over to clean your house?
And that's something that I think you mentioned this in the book, like at the time of a funeral might actually need to be done. You've got maybe guests coming from out of town. Maybe you're going to have people at the house. Maybe things have been difficult lately if someone had been ill, and maybe there is some cleanup that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Phone calls to be made, uncomfortable phone calls to be made. Someone to hold their hand and walk them through a lot of this. When I started doing talks in conjunction with this book, one of the best things that someone said to me, and it's not in the book, and I always like to share it, because we all have different gifts, talents, and abilities that we can be sharing with someone else. And a woman said that when her son was critically injured in an accident, and the mother had to quit her job to take care of this son 24 hours a day, and the hospital bills were just piling up. And she said, you know what? I'm a medical coder. Could I come over if it's not too much of an imposition? And if you think this is something I could help with, I'd be happy to go over all your medical bills with you. And she said she just broke down crying because that was so overwhelming. And she just didn't want to deal with it. So she just let it stack up.
Wow. Yeah.
And I thought, there's always something we could be doing. Teachers, could I tutor your kids if they've fallen behind? Could I work? Do you think your kids need, caught up? Can I help your kids catch up? There's always something that we could be doing that's out of the normal, that might be something that no one would even think that they needed or could ask for that kind of help.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and speaking of things that one might not realize is needed, you mentioned sitting at someone's house during a funeral. Can you talk about why that's important?
It's important because honestly, there are a lot of people that see in obituaries and go online and they see that someone has died, and they look from where they, what neighborhoods they were from, what they were involved in, and they can show up to the house a lot of times and ransack the house and steal from them. They prey on the bereaved and the grieving.
Because it's been announced publicly that everyone's going to be gone at 11 a.m. on Friday for this funeral.
Right.
See, and this is interesting because this is something I didn't know until, I guess it was before my husband died. It was when another friend's husband died. That was the first time I'd heard of it. But it is tricky sometimes to find someone, because it can't be someone close enough that they would want to be at the funeral.
Right.
But it needs to be someone close enough that's willing to spend time, several hours at your house, and, that you're willing to open your door and let them hang out there. And in my case, my sister's friend came, and she didn't know me, and she wouldn't have been coming to the funeral, but she, as a favor to my sister, did it and came over, which was wonderful.
Right. Because your sister was grieving too,
Right.
and there's a lot of people that grieve someone who dies. It's not just the mother or the widow or the children. There are a lot of people who are grieving. And so there's a lot of ways that we can step out and support one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Terrific. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to ask on the topic of sending food. I know you've mentioned, that you mentioned in the book that sometimes people focus on dinners as things to bring. And I think you made some other suggestions to think about too.
Right. Well, and I never even thought about this. And actually, I took that suggestion and have used it many times now since I've written my book. Is a girlfriend told me that one of the best things that someone did for her was send over a breakfast basket. And they included orange juice and bagels and Danish and coffee and just everything that you would need for breakfast. And she said, we have people from out of town, and I just wasn't even thinking that. And when that arrived, it was just the most perfect thing. And I thought, that is wonderful. And, and I have another girlfriend, she and her partner are bartenders. And so they always send the drinks, the cups, the ice, all of that stuff. So there's just always those things that you could be doing that just think a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
If someone has kids, snack foods, fresh fruit's always nice.
Right. Yeah. Options.
Right. Yeah, terrific. Gosh, I think we could sit here and brainstorm all day on ways to help people, but this is so great to talk about this. And I feel like, it is a difficult thing for people to think about. They want to help.
Right.
And like you said, so often they just don't maybe know how and are worried about doing or saying the wrong thing.
Right. So this is what I like about the book, because I like the book because you can go chapter to chapter and find things of what people say, but you can find comprehensive lists. And I always say this to people: read it, pick something off the list that resonates with you. Okay. So if sitting on someone's couch while they're crying is, that's not your thing, but you feel that you can, send them a card every week or call their voicemail and check up on them, or that you can invite them out to dinner, pick something that represents you and what's most comfortable for you. Picking something even little is better than not doing anything at all.
Yeah. Good. Before we run out of time here, I do want to ask you about your podcast, Graduating Grief. And I think you have some other things going on that listeners might be interested in as well.
Right. I've started a Facebook group and a podcast called Graduating Grief. And I started this again because it was something I think that I needed when I lost my son. We were in a wonderful support group. And it was exactly what we needed when we needed it. But it got to be that after going for maybe 18 months, I was ready to graduate. I felt worse leaving than I did when I went in, which meant that I was healing, which was a good thing, right? So I was ready to graduate. I graduate back into living my life. But there were so many fears that were surrounding that. There was a lot of guilt that was surrounding that. There's a lot of crazy mental things that go on of when this feeling sorrow, but then laughing for the first time, or feeling joy. There's that conflict that goes inside your brain. And so what I've done is I've started a podcast and a group on Facebook to help women who want to step back into life, but maybe need their hand held, maybe need some encouragement, maybe need to do some work on the guilt or the thought process that goes into it, the fear of stepping into the unknown, of maybe even planning on what their new normal is going to look like. It doesn't just have to happen. You can design it. You can figure out what that's going to be like now for you. There's always choice involved. And so I'm here to help them do that. It's like the next step, you're graduating from the pain of your grief and stepping back into the joy of living life again. It's possible. I'm living proof that it's possible. And I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about helping women do that.
Yeah, good. Terrific. Well, I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes so people can find that if they're interested in checking out that. Okay. One last question here to wrap up. If you could say one thing to friends and family of grieving people, what would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, it's not about you. So step out of your fear and step out in love. And that's the most important thing. And whatever that looks like for you, doing something, anything, even if it's awkward, is going to be better than not showing up at all. So be there in the way that you best can for you and for them, and make sure that they feel loved and supported by you.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. Well, I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Sherrie Dunlevy, author of How Can I Help? Your go-to guide for helping loved ones through life's difficulties. So Sherrie, where can listeners find you and find your book if they'd like to learn more?
Well, for a personalized copy, a signed copy, they can go to sherriedunlevy.com, and that's SHERRIE, Dunlevy, DUNLEVY, or you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever.
Okay, terrific. Well, Sherrie, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Jenny, thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sherrie Dunlevy as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 88. And a shout out today to all my listeners in West Virginia. Sherrie joined us for this interview from West Virginia, so I want to give a special warm welcome to people who are listening from there. And if you know of any grief resources in your community that I should know about, please reach out and let me know. I'm actually setting up for Children's Grief Awareness Month, which is in November, so starting in just a few days here. I am setting up a whole bunch of live stream interviews, and I'm going to be doing 1 to 2 per day, and talking to different grief centers, grief programs, different grief resources in various communities all over the place. And some of them are, location specific, and some of them are virtual or online resources that are not dependent on any particular location. And I am going to be sharing those as live interviews during Children's Grief Awareness Month, and then creating a new resources section on my website with all these resources so people can go in and they can find something close to them, and also find other kinds of online or virtual resources. So wherever you are, if you have been participating with a grief program and you'd like to let me know about that, you can send me an email, jenny@jennylisk.com, or ask them to go to my website, and I'll put a link in the show notes where people can go and schedule an interview if somebody runs a grief center. Okay, all for now. As always, thank you very much for listening, and until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.